Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
Well, hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in and listening. We got a good show tonight. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. And hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Hey, Stuart. Thanks for having me. Having storms here, which is really unusual, but they're going on all the time.
Yeah, you guys down there seem to be getting hammered night and day. I don't know. The weather is so bizarre all over the world, and I don't think people really realize it. If you tune in your radio and listen to the local, you don't get the clue as to what's really going on out there. Where should we start? There has been a switch made. I guess Priebus is gone, which is good. He was deep state anyway, and kind of a globalist, and probably one of the leakers. But now we have a military general, as I understand it. You want to fill us in on that a little bit?
Well, that's correct. Surprisingly today, actually this evening, President Trump announced that Priebus was gone from the White House, and that General John Kelly, who is actually was serving under Homeland Security, he was the one leading the battle against illegal immigration and the border battles and all of this, and he was doing a good job. However, he's been pulled into the White House to become the new chief of staff Monday. And there is a lot of talk in the background that possibly this will slow down the leaks out of the White House, and at the same time, there's a number of military people saying that he's perfect for the job at this moment in time because of the possibility of war almost any time.
So, in other words, he wants somebody who is a military man managing the so to speak, communications that are going to go out to the people of America. That's kind of ominous, don't you think?
Well, not really, because you remember when he actually began to run for election, we continually saw a list of generals that was meeting with him almost on a daily basis, and generals and other military officers seemed to follow him everywhere he went, and a lot of veterans too. And then the chief of staff now, Scaramucci is the director of communications, but the chief of staff will run the White House basically under Trump. And so not only do you have would he control somewhat communications going out, he would also control who comes in, which there wasn't much control earlier in that aspect. But there's a lot of rumors in the background about a situation with North Korea and Iran, and I think a number of veterans or people that's in the media, especially that are veterans, are really glad that John Kelly's now going to be instrumental in the White House, because they say he knows how to work Washington, and he also knows how to work with the military and the Pentagon, so that's a plus.
Well, I think you're probably right. That sounds like they are maybe heading into a war. They know it. I was listening to a little bit. I had to be out most of the time today, but I was listening a little bit, and it seems like the implication is that we don't have any options left now, and war may be of some type, or a I don't know, I guess you could call it a sudden strike, or some other kind of military options are back on the table full force. From just little comments they were making, is that your take too, that we are very, very close, or could be very close to war?
Well, especially after North Korea fired a ballistic missile today. The day after Iran fired a ballistic missile, it was a prototype of the North Korean missile, and both were successful. And the North Korean ballistic missile actually went quite a distance past the International Space Station. And they say that's not good because they now have the capability of firing anywhere in Alaska. They got Hawaii now under, their target area, and they've reached a level of expertise that has to be stopped. And a number of the generals today were saying it has to be stopped militarily because this cannot go any further. This is the end of it. And so I found it ironic that an admiral that was over the Pacific fleets made a comment yesterday that the U.S. Navy was ready to go nuclear on North Korea or China as needed. So,
wow.
We're probably very close to having to deal with this situation. I don't think anybody's going to rein Kim in. He don't know what being reined in means.
Yeah, he sure doesn't. It's like he's kind of mocking everybody, really, in the end of it. Well, I was reading an article where some experts were saying that the missile technology he seems to have is very, very similar to both Chinese and Russian designs. And, they keep saying, well, he doesn't have these missiles, he can't do this. I'm not so sure. He couldn't really do some damage with what he already has, and who knows what they have smuggled in and got underground.
Well, Stuart, it's not hard for North Korea if people would think about the map. North Korea has a border with both China and Russia. They don't really have to smuggle anything. They can just roll it across the border. It's not that big a deal, And what's interesting, he has fired so many missiles recently. Where did he come up with the funds and the technology to fire that much missile technology? It's way out of order now. Yeah, it's almost like how the New World Order group and the rich men especially, I guess we can pin it on them a little bit. We can call it Obama if you want to, but how actually the New World Order basically through Obama funded Iran and its nuclear program and its missile technology and the ability to produce mass missiles. Well, I think probably the same thing occurred in North Korea, which means that they were being set up to fight probably the great Satan, which we are.
Yeah. Well, we've often wondered if this isn't a trap for the United States. I mean, look at the benefit for China and also Russia if they can get America to go in there and make a military strike that gets rid of Kim, hopefully. And then I was reading an article where Chinese military have already said, and the Chinese government, that they're probably going to have to go into North Korea to stabilize it once an attack has been made. So I guess they're laying their cards out on a table. A lot of people don't realize that North Korea is very, very rich in minerals, and particularly rare earth. And it would benefit both Russia and China to make that peninsula their own as part of the kings of the East, which, technically speaking, South Korea probably could not be considered part of the kings of the East at this point because of their allegiance to the United States. Have you heard any more about the leader of South Korea? I know he was against all this, but any more on that THAAD missile defense system? And Japan, what are they doing other than preparing for war?
Well, Japan is preparing for war, and they've gone into a council meeting after the missile was fired and landed off their shore. And South Korea has begun firing drills, which they that's always what they do. They fire some rounds into the sea. That's not going to bother Kim at all. And ironically, I saw something, I read something earlier, and it said it was talking about, Iran and the different Muslim countries, and the question came up, why anybody would be, jealous of a South Korea. And I didn't realize it, but there's been an incredible amount of patents over the last few years that came out of South Korea, and I'm trying to remember one patent that came out of 1 billion Muslims.
Wow. So, there's probably a lot of stuff going on in the background we really don't know. Most wars are fought over minerals or energy. And so it makes you wonder what else is going on underneath the table, so to speak, that the American people aren't going to know about. So do you suppose the Illuminati, let's word it this way, a lot of people don't realize, well, Russia's doing this, Iran's doing that, North Korea's doing that. But is this not all orchestrated from on the top, from Satan and the Illuminati? So when you hear like North Korea is going to hit America, it's really not. It is North Korea, but the order's coming from the Illuminati and the people who run the world, basically. Same thing with Russia. And it's almost like they're a stage play, a book.
Well, that's exactly true. And what's so interesting is the wild cards in the deck, and we mentioned a few of them. Putin's a wild card. Benjamin Netanyahu's a wild card. Donald Trump's a wild card. Probably, it's very interesting. You'd asked me about the new guy that was president in South Korea, and he's a pacifist, basically. He's trying to make a deal with Kim, and that hasn't worked out very well. History could prove already that Kim don't work out deals. And so...
the deal, yeah.
Yeah. And the rhetoric right now that I'm hearing in the background is chatter that we may have to simply accept the incredible amount of loss of life and injury in South Korea when this starts, because it does not appear to be able to be backed down. This is going to be a military confrontation, is what everyone's saying. And I'm very concerned, too, like you, that, we don't understand, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. They'd love to set a trap for the great Satan to walk into.
Yes, and it would be to their great benefit, because they wouldn't really have to lift a finger. They can get rid of Kim, blame it on America, and then they just walk in. Because there's no way we could, as a military, take North Korea. We just don't have the power. I mean, the logistics would be horrific. There's no way we could do it. So it's like that article was saying, and it came right from the Chinese government, basically, that they were getting ready to have to go in. And they were very worried about a mass exodus. And they were also worried about radiation from a nuclear strike of some sort, and they warned America not to do that, or they would hope that America would not do that. It's almost like the Chinese are not doing anything, which sort of, they know that if they Donald Trump is like a bull, and if you wave a red flag in front of him, he's going to charge. And it seems like they're deliberately provoking him into this. I mean, did we not have Iran just launch another missile?
Oh, absolutely. They recently, a day or so ago, they launched a ballistic missile and they claimed they put up a satellite. Now, I don't know what they did, but that's the claim. And around the world, people said it was a successful launch, so they did something. What's interesting in this scenario, though, is what you and I have said for months. You and I talked about how that You know, it was like a parallel universe, basically, that North Korea and Iran had a parallel nuclear program where they were working together with all of this, and they were being funded. And, you know, what's so interesting is I don't know that North Korea particularly cares about Israel. However, Iran does, and all the pressure that Israel is under at the moment, you know, from the terrorism to the threats of missile attacks, et cetera, is coming from Iran. And so, you know, once the North Korea situation, if it does, begins, Iran's probably going to begin to move.
Yeah, we've got Daniel chapter 8 staring us in the face. And there was a fellow over in Israel, a rabbi, I think he was, who did a lot of research. I think he spent a long time at it, and came to the conclusion that the he-goat is the United States of America. And the ram in that is, of course, Iran, and we do attack. And we all but destroy Iran in that massive attack. So yeah, and isn't it the 12th Iman that is supposed to emerge? They need their big war so that they can have their savior, so to speak, come out of the woodwork. I think he climbs up out of a well in the symbology of it.
Yeah, the symbology of the whale. I wonder if the whale is a portal actually in you know, symbol speak or something. I don't know. Very weird. It's their Iman that they're waiting on, and they need a great catastrophe of war and the troubles to bring him out of that whale, so to speak.
Yeah. I remember a guy by the name of Rockstead, and he was a deliverance minister. I'm only going to make an excursion here for a little bit. It's kind of funny, because they had gone in, they had got a call. He's a deliverance minister, and they had got a call of demonic activity at this house. And so they go to this house, and they start dealing with the woman who is deeply possessed, and they finally get rid of most of the demons that are bothering her, harassing her. And the final power demon starts to negotiate. He says, well, if I can't have the house, I want the well. So they said, Joel, you can't have the well either. You just got to go. So, but, you know, the symbology of coming up out of the well, and the well must be maybe, would that be the bottomless pit? Possibly that they're talking about?
I don't really know. It's possible, I suppose. But if you look back at the Native American, the Hopi, and the Navajo legends, you know, they all built like a well or a little thing in their kivas, I guess as they called them, a little cubicle that was like a well that they said connected with the underworld. So, you know, that symbology, it's there in all of that, you know, type of speak that, you know, you don't really know what it means, but there's a lot of symbology there.
Yeah, well, you've dealt with demonic forces. I think the average person doesn't believe any of this stuff, and they're not going to believe it until they've run into it. These invisible entities that we can't really even understand how they can be ethereal beings and yet have a mind and a will, and they can really ruin people if you don't deal with them. And it's just one of the things that I guess most people just don't believe and can't believe because they can't see it. But Iran obviously desires, does it not, the total eradication of Israel. I mean, they've stated
absolutely.
that.
Matter of fact, you heard I guess you heard the information come out about an individual, I believe in California, calling for the killing of all Israelis. And that's the way Iran looks at it. Drive them in the sea and kill all of them.
What's that, Psalm 83, I think it is? That's what they want to do. That's what they desire to do. And, of course, Netanyahu says Israel is the little Satan, and we're the big Satan. So, and the Bible would tend to very much prophetically agree that when America's taken out, Israel's not far behind. So I think we're heading into this final phase, this final warfare, whatever you want to call it. Where do you want to go from here? I mean, if before we leave Iran, if they're firing off these missiles in coordination with what North Korea is doing, then do we not have kind of a proof that this is all coordinated?
I believe you're right.
So I guess it just depends on when they unleash the dogs of war. And Trump is going to be known as the war president. So if we have major warfare and a lot of people get hurt, he'll be blamed for all of it. And maybe that's what brings Obama, which I believe he is going to return. I just have that feeling. I got no proof. That would bring Obama back to the helm.
Well,
let's get into the Trump. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to mention what you were talking about, blaming Trump, because actually a lot of the mainstream media now are calling President Trump the chaos president.
Oh, they are.
And, yeah, that's the wording. And, of course, there was a book by Dr. Lance Wallnall. He wrote God's Chaos Candidate, and he talked about Donald J. Trump and the American Unraveling. And when he wrote the book, he called him the Chaos Candidate. But, of course, now he won the election. He's not the candidate anymore. And even mainstream the last few days, especially since they've had the changes in the White House and trying to stop the leaks, the mainstream media is calling him the chaos president. So they are. It's almost like he's being set up to get that reputation, I guess you could say.
Wow. Well, that's kind of interesting because usually mainstream media, not usually, always, is a tool of the Illuminati. And maybe they are communicating this to everyone, like the Hollywood communicates through the movies, that order out of chaos, and Trump is the chaos guy from which will come the new world order. It's odd that they're actually using that kind of phraseology.
Yeah.
Wow. What's going on in Israel? From what I hear, it's not good. Let's put it that way. They seem to be under siege.
Israel actually is under siege from different directions all around them right now. Matter of fact, they're since they've had the crisis with the Temple Mount, there are actually demonstrations underway in Amman, Jordan, for Jordan to disband the treaty that they have with Israel and become an enemy again. And of course, at the moment, Israel's prepared for Hamas attacks, Hezbollah attacks. They've got ISIS over in Syria that's around Damascus, which is not very far actually from Israel. They, they have, of course, Iran all around them, particularly. And they've got the Russians now right off their Golan border. Israel pretty much is surrounded by the moment, and you use that term siege, they literally are under siege. And as a matter of fact, what a lot of people don't realize is that don't follow the news, is that not only has Trump been under the guns by the New World Order for the last 6 months or more, but so has Benjamin Netanyahu after he began to make deals and begin to try to work with Trump. Netanyahu, his government has come under incredible New World Order attack. So, it's trouble everywhere.
Well, I think the middle name of the last days is trouble everywhere. I think you've got it right on the head. That's basically what it's all about. Chaos and trouble to the point where the nations cannot extricate themselves. And it seems like we're running headlong into this very, very rapidly, and I'll get into the 5777 stuff in a little while, but it's right on time. Let's put it that way.
Well, at the same time,
all of this is on time. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, to put it also timely is the fact that none of the bills, of course, we know that, and matter of fact, I even heard Geraldo say last night, which I was shocked, because he's usually pretty liberal. He even came out and said not only is there a Obama deep state or shadow government working against Trump with people still in the government, but he even said there's not only that deep state, but he said there's a Democratic deep state that's working against Trump, and he said even a Republican deep state, and he said they're all after Trump, all of them. They surrounded him and they're attacking him continually and trying to stop him from being able to have any success at all in any administration, no matter if it's just a few months. And at the same time, we saw today, or rather last night, McCain, who had his vote and voted against. This is what I find interesting. All these Republicans that voted against Obamacare and ran their last elections on we're going to repeal Obamacare are all voting not to repeal it. They're standing behind Obamacare. They want to keep Obamacare probably because the real architect of Obamacare goes back into the New World Order and George Soros. And so really I look at it like when McCain actually cast his vote against doing anything to Obamacare, that was actually George Soros' vote. It wasn't McCain's, because we've already heard the information, and it came out how that George Soros had funded the McCain Institute and funneled money to him. So we know who he talks for. But what I find interesting, Stuart, is the fact that 6 months in, they are still not giving Trump anything that he's tried to do for the American people. They've actually thrown Trump under the proverbial bus, and they also at the same time have thrown the American people under the bus. And I kind of wonder when the American people might actually open their eyes and see what's happening to them.
I don't think that's ever going to happen. It's not going to happen until the FEMA camps, when they're looking out from the barbed wire of the FEMA camps. Then it'll finally dawn on them that they have been had and that a communist coup actually took place in the United States of America, because that's what we're watching. We are watching, and I don't know why people can't say it. I don't know why Hannity or Tucker Carlson and the other talking heads on Fox News, the most conservative, of course, obviously CNN and the rest of them are part of the communist movement. But this really is a communist takeover of the United States of America, and they're following their playbook. And what the American people don't realize is if Trump goes, which he's going to, I'm quite sure of that, it's all over for the United States. And they really need to start studying their Bibles, because America is Babylon the Great. And we are watching 100% fulfillment of the prophecies against Babylon, America. And because they will not accept that, and I sometimes get emails from people, that's interesting, your take on America being Babylon. No, it's more than interesting. It's a fact. And people better wake up to it and make preparations for it, because America is going down, and the deep state is going down with it. I've never seen such blindness. You know, when you talk about naval intelligence, or you talk about Air Force intelligence, or all the intelligence agencies and how they work to, how do I say, protect their interests, they're putting a noose around their own necks. In fact, it's already there, and it's well tied. And I believe they're, bent over with saws, and they're sawing off their own legs of the chair they're on.
Yeah.
It's too bad to watch. It really makes me kind of upset to watch it, because we have really good people in the intelligence agencies as well as traitors. But because they are so apostate from the Bible, and we are in the middle of the great apostasy that was foretold, they don't realize what's really happening to them. And the American people don't seem to realize at all what's happening to them, and they do not understand judgment of the Lord. And it is severe. All they got to do is look at Israel, and we're kind of following Israel in the apostasy they had way back in before AD 70. And the people who read, go ahead.
I was just going to mention you're hitting the nail on the head right there, because I remember, and you probably do, years earlier, and when you and I were in ministry and stuff, the church was bragging. They thought they had bragging rights on Israel or against Israel, and how bad Israel was, and all of this stuff that Israel had done, and how Israel had left the Lord and crucified the Lord and went away from him, and blah, 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 blah. Listen, today when I look out at the church, the so-called church, what we people call the church, I can't find any room for them to brag at all. Matter of fact, they seem more apostate than actually Israel was.
Yeah, I think you got a good point there. It's interesting that when you talk about apostasy and judgment, judgment begins at the house of the Lord. And, of course, the judgment of the American Christian, and I don't know why they have forgotten all about the FBI's Project Megiddo report, where they openly identified Bible-believing Christians as enemies of the state. And it kind of went right over their head, but I do remember that, because I had a copy of it, and that was when I was getting tons of hits on our website, and I put that up there for people to read. But it kind of went right over their head. Well, it couldn't possibly happen to America. None of this can happen to America. Well, what do they think the fusion centers that are popping up all over the United States are for? Intelligence gathering. What did they think Jade Helm was all about? Gathering people who are enemies of the state. They even had it on video showing people being arrested and lined up in chains to go to their FEMA camp to obviously be eradicated and destroyed. It's right there in prophecy anyway that we're in for trouble, and the American Christian is really, really, really in deep trouble, because God is going to use deep state and the traitors to judge the church, and then what's remaining of the church, I should say, and then God is going to judge the deep state. And he's done that before. In fact, he's done it a number of times. He'll use evil to judge apostasy, and then he gets rid of the evil people. It's kind of interesting how all that works, and yet nobody pays much attention to it. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's another version of judgment that a lot of people don't associate either, is the Haman situation. And sometimes he doesn't wait for the bad guys to judge the good guys and judge the bad guys. Sometimes in Haman's situation, he actually turns topsy-turvy the circumstances and you get what almost like a reverse judgment. So we've got to watch. We've got to, you talked about, Stuart, this pivot point, September the 23rd. We've also got an eclipse coming up in August,
yes.
a really important one, and we've got all of this going on, and so we've got to really be cautious here and watch what happens, because if there somehow is some intervention, and I'm really, and the reason I bring this up, Stuart, is the fact that there was breaking news last night, and I don't know if you heard it or not, but they are now investigating the top lawyer for the FBI for corruption, and some more of the FBI. They're finding out information that the FBI has been apparently so politicized that it's only a political arm of the deep state, and really it's only the FBI seems to be only functional when, Stuart, you or I break the law. Okay, we can put it that way.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of
yeah.
and we've got a lot of examples we can lift up, but they're also investigating a number of the top people in the FBI, and so I'm beginning to wonder if I'm kind of leaning towards a Haman situation, which you don't know. I mean, we really don't know, and at the same time, intermixed in all this is this pivot point that we're not sure which way this is going to go, and we're not sure how long Trump remains in office.
No. There's a lot of people that are gainsaying all of this and saying we've got another 10 years, we've got another 20 years, we've got another 30 years. I don't think so. I think there's just too many numbers that are popping up, and God is the mathematician of all mathematicians. And speaking about mathematics, that leads us into Bible codes. Is there anything new coming out on the Bible codes other than what we saw from Barry the other day on our interview with him? That was kind of an interesting interview. I mean, he kind of let loose a few things that, let's say he was circumspect about it, but there was some interesting information that sort of confirms everything that Stan Deo has said a number of times on our show.
Well, it was
anything new.
It was really interesting, Stuart, and what I find interesting also is just as soon as we got through with his interview, I began to have cyber attacks against my computer. And if you'll remember, the last time we had him on, I also lost everything, and you got attacked too, and lost your phones and a lot of other stuff. But Barry is really good. He knows a lot. He won't tell a lot, but he knows a lot. And we found out a lot of data with his interview. And at the same time, I did want to mention, I talked to Richard Shaw yesterday, and, of course, I shared with you that I'd had the conversation that next week we may be able to bring out some new Torah code information from Rips, Glazerson, and Haralick and those folks that do those codes that will be coming out of Israel. I think they're about to release some new data, so we'll just see where this goes, and maybe we can even wind up getting Richard on maybe next week.
Yeah, that would be great. These Bible codes are, they have been, how do I word this, rather silent. They were coming out with all kinds of codes, and then all of a sudden it just went totally silent. Like maybe they had already found the stuff, but they didn't want to release it.
Well, you got to remember, Stuart, what I think is this, and I'd like your opinion on it. We know that when they became silent, it wasn't because they didn't have any new data or that they had stopped running Torah codes. It was simply because of what they had found that simply wasn't going to release it, and they kept it close to cuff, especially about the end of 5777 and moving into 5778 time frame. And Stuart, I look at this is to me this seems odd that suddenly approaching this August eclipse, and then also the pivot point, as I guess I call it, of September the 23rd, they begin to release some of the data. So I think I really believe we're at a very crucial. You can call it a sign if you want to call it signs. You can call it a season if you want to call it seasons, but I think we're in a changeover, a pivot point from one dispensation or epoch or whatever terminology you want to use, from one age to another, I think we're just right on the verge of that movement.
Yeah, I do too, because when was it that I released the Omega Code? Most people didn't seem to want to. I don't know if they're afraid to look at this stuff or what, but the research that I did, as you know, was on the last 120 years of this age, and how Israel is the key pivot or key clock, I guess you could call it a time clock, for planet Earth, which has been proved over and over again by other writers. So when you put all of that together, when you look at all the cycles and how it all terminates, as I found out, 2017. And it begins in Israel in 1897, had 120 years, 2017. Then you had Allenby retaking Jerusalem back in 1917. You got all these sevens, and we're coming up on a number of sevens again. But all the cycles, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, 40-year, 50-year, 70-year cycles fell on all the same key dates in Israel's modern life. And it all terminates 2017. Now, I think a lot of people don't want to look at termination. But Jesus himself said, I'm Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And I guess my point is, there has to be an end. It doesn't just drag out for centuries and centuries. There is a termination point. And as we approach that termination point, all the prophecies will converge. Jesus said, when you see all these things, know that I am at the door. We're seeing all those things. So, you know, people, for whatever reason, don't want to face the fact that, hey, our life could change overnight and be totally different. And it is possible if the theology that is presented for a either pre-trib or at-trib rapture, which most people mock and say it's just not possible. But if it is, and we are at the pivot point, church is going to be gone. The whole dispensation's over. The law of, or the age of grace will be closed. And we're going to go into, like you just said, a whole new era of life on earth, totally different probably than anything we've ever known. And if the church is removed, definitely. I remember this fella some time ago, and I'd like your opinion on it. I think you probably know him, or know about him anyway. Had that vision, and the vision was actually a vision of after the church had been removed. I don't remember what his name was. And at the time, I guess he was pretty shocked by what the Lord showed him. But he said everything was normal, like today. For all you folks out there listening, I mean, it's just a normal day, and I'd advise everybody to thank the Lord for every normal day we have from now on, because I think it's very soon going to be abnormal. But he said that all over the world, the graves were opened up, and everybody saw the resurrection of the dead in the Lord. And this was a global event. And then they suddenly vanished. and everything was different from that moment on. And he said that people were so sad, like they had just lost their mom or their dad or their favorite loved one. They just lost them. And there was mourning, and then chaos ensued. Real chaos. Because everybody began to realize they had been left behind. And that all of this in the Bible was true. How do you think people are going to react if that occurs? And it can very well occur. I've been researching this closing in on the end of 2017. I already knew 10 years ago 2017 was a key year. That became very, very obvious. But as I focus in on everything that dovetails into 2017, it's becoming more and more obvious. This really is, as you have said, this is a key pivot area. Going from 2017 to 2018, or 5777 to 5778, this is not going to be pretty. There's going to be a major deception, which I want to get into. Well, what do you think about that fellow's vision and how people really would react? What do you think?
Well, I find it really interesting. I vaguely remember you telling that once before, but I'm like you. I don't remember who had it. But what's interesting is the fact that possibly that may be why some of the Torah codes haven't been released about this time frame, the end of 5777 and going into 78, which is we're coming up on, is
yes.
Because of they don't know how the people will react to that information. But it's also telling to me that it appears some of the rabbis are about to release some of that data, so we may be moving into that time frame rather quickly. And I'm very interested in watching. You know, you said you're beginning to watch now the last couple of days of July and some feasts on into
yes.
August, and of course we've got the eclipse there with lots of signs, and then we're going towards September the 23rd and this cosmic sign. And I have to reflect again that Stan Deo says this is the greatest sign, without enlarging on that. So we have to look at it like this is not normal. This is just not a normal time frame of a sign. This is something else. This may be a combination of a sign and an event together.
Well, I think people are, how do I word this? People have grown to be skeptics, even in the church, even in the remnant of the church. The numbers are there, we sail by, nothing occurs, and on it goes. And somebody sent me an article, and the guy's saying, it's another 20 years or so before anything can possibly begin to happen. That's not according to the numbers that are given in the Bible. The Bible is very clear, and the early church taught a 7,000-year doctrine. But the 6,000 years was to come to an end, and then the millennial reign of Jesus would begin. And as I said before, people don't want an end. They want to continue to live as they have, to go visit grandma and all of that. That is rapidly coming to an end. You can't have an alpha and an omega, as the Lord said, without having an end, the omega point. And it's very, very possible that the omega point in reality is 9/23, or actually 9/21 and 22, was the Feast of Trumpets, moving into Daniel's 70th week. And all the evidence on earth, all the evidence in the heavens is pointing to that changeover. And it's like the Lord is picking up a 2x4 and hammering us over the head. Wake up, wake up, wake up. We are here. And we don't realize, I guess, collectively anyway, of course most people could care less, because they're going to be caught by a sudden destruction. So it's very, very interesting. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna mention that, you know, what you said really reminds me so much of the Omega Code. And if you remember, Richard Shaw watched the Omega Code, and he thought it was very accurate. Actually, he gave an assessment on it that it was very accurate. And you know, if people don't have the Omega Code, they could probably still get a copy from you if they want to watch that. But what I find interesting is the fact that you know, even if we're not even if we're not stumbling across the signs, you know, we're on the verge of a war. You know, a war would change everybody's lives overnight, and so would an EMP event or any other thing that's approaching us. We've got you know, asteroids. We've got a destroyer with an entourage around it, which most people don't believe, but it's out there. And any of this stuff, and you know, we had talked about, Stuart, the weather and how the atmosphere seems so electrified all the time, and I think that we're already, I believe, under the influence of not only a strange anomaly with our sun, but also probably the second sun, and it's very interesting. You know, I know people don't want to stop living like they've always lived, but I think there are about to be changes.
Yeah, it's going to be forced. It's kind of like Lot. You know, he didn't really want to leave Sodom, so they had to kind of escort him out. I really don't want to go, but he went anyway. And I think the same thing is happening today. People don't want to face the real possibility that in a couple of months or less, everything's going to change. The church could well be gone. It might not be. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the odds are pointing to this pivot area and an arrival. You know, this business of an arrival is not only in the Bible, it's everywhere in writings of the New Age, Native American prophecies. It's all about in Native American prophecies, it's about the arrival of the star people. And let me read a little bit from Phoenix Rising, which is an incredibly accurate rendition, I guess one could say, of what's going to happen to the United States. And everything she's basically said has already come to pass, and there's a few things left. But here's something she says that is very, very interesting to me. It's about the arrival. Let's see if I can find it here. Then there's another one. While I'm looking for that one, I do have one here. Have you ever heard of the book, The Great White Brotherhood?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Elizabeth Clare Prophet wrote it years and years and years ago. She's a New Ager. She's dead now. She passed away. But she was totally a New Ager. And what she had to say ties directly to the star sign in 923. So I'm just going to quote part of it, and I want your comment on it. For that time in history, when by the power of the spoken word, ascended masters, hierarchies of light, should talk with mankind again and walk with mankind and prepare the way for the second coming of the Christed One in the hearts of all mankind. This is the destiny of America, which is the same concept that Babylon the Great. It kind of confirms we are Babylon the Great, whether people like it or don't like it. But then she goes on to say, which is kind of interesting, about how people come and the ascended masters are the graduates cum laude of every culture and every history and every religion. So, in other words, they mix all the religions together. They are all trying to find God. And, of course, that is Masonry. Masonry claims there is no knowable truth, that what is true for one is simply not true for another. And, of course, Jesus Christ stands directly opposed to that and says, yes, there is a truth, and I'm it. So they don't like that anyway. But here's what it says. There are American, let's see if I can find it right here. The ascended masters are the graduates. They are Americans in the cosmic sense, but they have created consciousness to Christ, to Buddha, and to Mother. They live and move among us, yet to know them, we must become like them. What do you think about comments like that?
Well, it sounds like the total deception to me.
Exactly. Yeah. Over 4 centuries, these people have journeyed to the place prepared in the wilderness for the coming of the woman clothed with the sun and the birth of her divine man-child. That's the arrival. What 923 most likely is going to be, if the church is not removed, is an arrival of the fallen ones. And you remember how Stan Dale did all that work and going back into the ancient languages, and what he had to say about this arrival is it's not pleasant. It's going to be a hideous thing when they get here.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting. And I sent you an article earlier in the week. Everybody's big into this AI, artificial intelligence. And
I saw that.
Tried artificial, the robotics are really moving forward, but recently social media tried to use, I suppose, some algorithms of AI that they had created, and what they found, Stuart, and you read I sent a link to you, that they found that the AI began to talk back and forth to itself using a language they didn't understand, didn't know, and they had no clue what AI was doing, talking with AI, and it began to create its own language, and it got out of control, and they had to shut it off. What do you think?
Well, the movies Lawnmower Man and Lawnmower Man 2, people really should watch those movies. I mean, that was issued, I don't know how long ago. Pierce Brosnan, I think, played in that. And it was about this guy that was, well, I can't say mentally damaged, but not the brightest bulb on the block. And Bronson started to work with him, and they chained him up basically to a computer. And it's really a story about Antichrist and computers. And it's very similar to the Terminator series, where AI becomes self-aware and decides they don't need people anymore. And this was a language, from what I gather, that the geeks that do all this couldn't understand. It began to communicate in a language they had no idea what was being said.
That's right.
And that's kind of uncomfortable. You ever gone to a family or to a meeting where the people don't speak English and they don't translate what they're saying? It's very uncomfortable because you don't know what they're saying.
That's true.
So, if the warnings that scientists have successfully, this is from the article, trained computers to use artificial intelligence to learn from experience, one day they could well be smarter than their creators. And that almost sounds like what happened.
Yeah. Huh.
course, with the collective wisdom of humankind, I suppose it wouldn't take too much to be smarter than we are. We seem to have, individuals can be very intelligent, but when you put them all together, somebody ran an experiment, and they figured out that the IQ drops almost immediately, and the bigger the collective of people together, the more the IQ drops.
Huh.
So I guess that's where we're at. I found that thing from No Eyes, Native American shaman lady, actually, but I want to read this to people. She says, people's going to see new beings. Beings going to come much more. They come from there. She points to the sky. Beings going to show more and more. They no gonna hide, play games. It be time they show they really here all along. I find that a very, very interesting comment because of what it means to the church. She says, it be good when peoples believe because they're going to see with their own eyes. And, of course, people, the vast majority of people will say they believe in UFOs and aliens. But if their neighbor saw one and they didn't, they'd mock him.
Yeah.
And say he was nuts. But anyway, this is what she says. They're going to see with their own eyes. They're going to have to believe. It not be good when people's going to question state about stuff state already know for a long time. They're going to be plenty angry at the state. They're going to want to know why state hides stuff from the people. They're going to make people no trust the state. People's going to question. Here's the key to the whole thing. And what this arrival is really all about. People going to question church now. How about what church say about spirits? How about what church say about first man, first woman? Summer, that no stand up now. People's going to be much angry at church, too. So, doesn't that sound to you like the great, strong delusion?
Well, it absolutely does. Wow, that's really interesting, and it kind of goes along too with you asked Barry Rothman about Tithonia, and he had seen that, and he said, he even saw the ruins there on Mars, and he mentioned some locations on Mars at the same time, and so it almost makes you wonder, Stuart, and of course Barry is wondering if NASA does finally admit that they know there's life on Mars. He said they've already found it. I mean, it's not like they're hunting it. They've already found it. They know there is. What are people going to say? We're wondering what people are going to say when they find out it's a lot bigger deal than just Mars. I would think people's going to have a lot of trouble with all of that. All the hidden data coming out is, and probably Antarctica. Of course, we don't have a lot going that we know of on Antarctica that's being revealed, but we know something's happening there that's unexplainable.
Yeah, very much unexplainable. Maybe we should move over to the eclipse that's coming on August 21st, 33 days, which is a very, very interesting number, from Rosh Hashanah, or trumpets, and 40 days from Yom Kippur, atonement. Now, both of those numbers mean a lot to anybody that's really studied the mathematics of the Bible. But what I wanted to point out was, if you look up what eclipse actually means, now we can, obviously people know that the moon comes in front of the sun and blocks it out. But what it means is any obscuration of light, a reduction or loss of splendor status, reputation. Isn't that kind of an interesting meaning? Because if you focus on the obscuration of light, then you're well aware of partial eclipses. Now, Jesus Christ said he was the light, and he was the light of the world. He also said that humanity hated the light, and all but a few would actually come to the light to have their deeds reproved. You'll find that in John. I think that's chapter 3 maybe, or 4, one or the other. But anyway, this is a total eclipse. That means a total obscuration of Christ. A total elimination. That's kind of bothersome. Because if in fact that is a warning of what is coming within a month or so, depending on how it works, the church would be gone, because the church is called the light of the world, basically. We're supposed to be the light of the world. We're supposed to be showing the world the love of Christ, which people don't, I guess, how do I word this? They don't really appreciate the love of Christ because they don't view it as love at all, which is kind of odd, but that's the way it is, don't you think?
Oh, I do, and that's what's interesting, too. It even reminded me of Isaiah 60 when you was talking about it. You know, this great darkness comes down, the light goes up.
Yes, exactly. So do you think, now I'm just posing a question, do you think, because I think we can prove that if anything is happening on 9/23 or around that date, let's put it that way, this is of the fallen ones. And if it's an arrival of the fallen ones, then it's the arrival of the darkness, right?
That makes sense.
Okay, now if it's the arrival of the darkness, do you think the two witnesses would show up possibly at the same time the arrival takes place? Whoever they are.
To watch. Yeah, we'll just have to watch on that and see how this plays. You know, this is a time that we really have to watch closely day after day, because, you know, you were talking about you're really going to begin to watch in the next day or so, going on in towards August and into August. And it seems like there's a couple of months there we're just all going to have to really be really watchful to the events, not only the signs and seasons, but also to any happenings that we begin to pick up on.
Yeah, and it's amazing how when you put the numbers together along with the wording of the scriptures, how all of this actually works. The eclipse of the sun, for example, in 2017, and exactly 7 years later, it comes back and eclipses the United States and forms a cross in 2024, meaning I would surmise that mighty Babylon is history. And it's kind of interesting that it's a 7-year difference between the one that's coming up in August 21, which, by the way, is a 777, and 7 years later in 2024, because we have 7 years of Daniel's lost week, known as the tribulation period, or however you want, time of Jacob's trouble, time of Israel's trouble, whatever. And the 7 days of the ancient Jewish wedding rituals. I find that extremely interesting because Daniel's 70th week is 7 days. The Jewish wedding ritual, where the bridegroom comes, picks up his bride, takes her to the father's house, and they have a 7-day wedding ceremony. 7 years. Then the other one is 7 days of Noah. Remember? The Lord said, you have yet 7 days. Bring in these animals. And the Lord closed him up. Noah did not close the door on the ark. The Lord shut him in. And he was given a 7-day warning. Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be again. So I'm assuming from that, and that's not a good word sometimes, that we might get a 7-day warning. Now, a lot of people do not realize the significance of Tu B'Av, and that's coming up on the 6th and the 7th of August. And Tu B'Av, I'll just read a little bit from an article because it's really, really interesting. The 15th of Av is undoubtedly a most mysterious day. This is about the Tu B'Av feast. A search of coded Jewish law reveals no observances or customs for this date. And I've read other articles where Jewish rabbis are kind of mystified by the whole thing. The Talmud tells us that many years ago, the daughters of Jerusalem would go dance in the vineyards on the 15th of Av, that's Tu B'Av, and whoever did not have a wife would go there to find himself a bride. That sounds an awful lot like the Lord and the bride of Christ. And these ladies would put on white garments, white dresses. Does not Jesus clothe us with white robes of righteousness?
Right.
So when you look at some of these, now this is the 6th and the 7th of August this year. It's always on a full moon. And like he says in here, it is a festival of future redemption. And thus a day whose essence, by definition, is unknowable to unredeemed people. Isn't that interesting? So in other words, it's a mystery to the world, but not to the Lord's people. And what's interesting to me about this is the sunspot that led off that X-class humongous flare. I was told that this will be facing head-on Earth on the 6th and the 7th. So could this be a reference to the sun doing something really strange? It's kind of interesting because from the 7th of Av, or 7th of August, it's 14 days exactly to the solar eclipse. And that eclipse bothers me because of that fault line that they have found that runs almost from Oregon all the way down to the Carolinas. And the solar eclipse follows that fault line almost exactly. So, lots of trouble coming, I think, or possible trouble. We don't really know for sure. But,
well, I find it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say there that eclipse is interesting, and at the same time, as we're coming into August, and you mentioned the X flare that flew off the sun a few days ago, and, Ed Dames actually put out an alert and said that one actually concerned him because that was like a precursor to the ones that are going to hit Earth. And he said that one literally did. One of the flares did strike Mars, and they verified that. And then, he recently also had put out, he said the shortness seemed like there was a shortness of time, and said, indicated that President Trump already knew about the kill shot, and there was nothing they could do about that.
Well, yeah, they've kind of ignored hardening. I'm sure the military has hardened their stuff. And probably your intel agencies have hardened some of their stuff because they fully intend to go underground and let you and I ride it out on the surface. But we don't know. I mean, it just seems odd that you've got all these numbers that are adding up. And, you know, if you just took the star sign by itself, you probably wouldn't have much of an argument because people could say, well, you know, we have those things before, and actually they haven't, as I reported once before. If you go into Stellarium and actually run it, this sign is wholly different than anything that's ever shown up before in the way it's laid out. And when you couple that with the occult and their arrival of the fallen ones, it all begins to add up. And then you go back to remember the blood moon tetrads?
Oh, yes.
Well, in 2014, they bookended Passover and Tabernacles, and this is very unusual, and 2015, Passover and Tabernacles, which is also very, very unusual. And it's just fascinating to me, 2 of those blood moons fell in the sign of Virgo, the Virgin. 2 of the others fell in the sign of Leo. So not only was the Lord telling Israel, look out, because I'm bookending these not Jewish feast days, but the Lord's feast days, of which there are 7, and I'm doing it twice, like a verily, verily, I'm coming back to you, and I'm going to fulfill trumpets and atonement and tabernacles. I don't see how you can read it any other way. And what's very interesting is if you go from the last blood moon and you go 726 days, you come to 923. And if you go into Strong's Concordance, 726, hapazo, or the rapture, to seize, to catch up, to snatch away. And in Isaiah, it talks about, come, my people, enter into thy chambers and hide thyself until the indignation be overpassed. I just don't see how all of this stuff can be wrong. What do you think?
Well,
I mean, the more I dig into this, the more convinced I'm getting that this really is probably Omega Point.
Yeah, I find it interesting that actually your Omega code really, and you did that years ago, but it actually had the final point we're talking about, basically.
Yes. I had pinpointed it to the year. I had not pinpointed it to an exact date. But the more I dig into this thing, I think we are going to get probably a 7-day warning. And it's going to be fascinating. And if we don't, and let's say we sail right on through and absolutely nothing happens, I guess it's back to the drawing boards. But what bothers me is we have so much mathematics involved. We have so much things going on Earth. And Jesus said, when you see all of them coming together, look out, because I'm right there. And if nothing happens, then would humanity not have the right to say, well, do we have any signs that we can rely upon? I mean, it's kind of like driving down a highway. You're on the highway, and it says 55 miles to Minneapolis, we'll say. But it's actually 500 miles to Minneapolis. So you could say that sign that says 55 miles is actually worthless. So, and we do have people now saying, where is the promise of his coming? So if nothing happened, that would be a crescendo among the church. If anybody's paying attention in the church, I'm not sure they are, but what do you think?
I think it's rather interesting, and to go along with that, you and I have talked before about the FEMA drills that are going on across the country and getting the ham operators to link up with locations that have, the Faraday cages, have their units in Faraday cages, and how that these actually transmit information to underground locations. And I'm aware of the underground locations, so what you said earlier, that is true. They will be underground, and people on top will be giving them information if possible.
Well, the information may not give them a whole lot of good or do them a whole lot of good, but and if we get into a war soon, and I guess there's debate as to when this Scotty Clark, I think he calls himself Scott Clark, said that he was kind of curious if hidden in the code was the fact that 923 might be the beginning of Isaiah 17.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
well,
that would be the start of the trouble, the real trouble.
Wow. Well, you remember, Stuart, a number of years ago, actually, I believe, when you were doing a mega code, you mentioned then, you said, I don't know about all this timing, but if I ever see Isaiah 17, I'll know where we are.
Yes. And if the rapture of the church were to take place, I guess it wouldn't matter where we are, would it? But I think people have trouble even beginning to think about the possibility that this translation of the saints could actually take place. It depends on the theology and whether people are reading it. As you know, there are huge arguments over when the actual translation or rapture of the church. There are those who claim there is no rapture. We go through it all. There are people who claim it's pre-trib, which could mean any time right now, or at trib, or into trib, or mid-trib, or pre-wrath, and it's just total confusion. But I have often thought... Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
Well, I was just going to mention something that crossed my mind as you were talking there. I don't know if you saw the information today, but this evening they reported that since Congress was not able to pass, anything for Trump to sign, that they had all left to go home for 5 weeks. Now, I find that interesting. It sounds like a pre-planned vacation because the 5 weeks, Stuart, there'll be no more Congress for 5 weeks, which means that puts us completely through the eclipse.
Yes, it does.
And into September, just before the pivot point. I find that timing interesting.
Yeah, they may know. I've often I have no proof, but it's kind of like a spirit thing. They know that everything is going to change, and they don't care. They flat don't care because they know things are going to change. So it doesn't make any difference whether they pass anything, don't pass anything. And this new law that outlaws Trump from doing just about anything that they've passed, and the new law of seizure, property seizure, bids ill for this the year we're running into, 2018. It seems like they're laying the groundwork for the new world order and a total communist police state. And I guess my only comment to the deep state, you're on the wrong side. This is going to be real, you're on the wrong side. So, but you can warn them, and you can warn the church. They don't listen. They don't hear it.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
I can't remember the last time you or I got invited to speak at a church. Can you?
Yeah, that's many moons ago. They don't want to hear the truth, and you can't do anything with someone that doesn't want to hear it. They're in denial, like you say. They're drinking denial tea. They're swimming in denial river, taking baths in denial water, and you can't reach them. They don't want to be reached, and people really need to start examining themselves. If this is true, that we are at the end of 2017, we're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble, and it could go all the way through, I suppose. 2017 goes all the way through to December 31st. I just have a feeling, though, somehow, that it's closer than that, and that this is a key pivot point, and Israel is going to find out the hard way that the Lord has come back to deal with them on the Davidic and Abrahamic covenants, and that he has every intention of severe punishment for their rejection of the Lord. So,
yeah, well, as you said, Stuart, you said we need to watch very closely from now till the pivot point to see if there's any delays, and that's something to watch for, to see if there is like the sandstorm delay that you spoke of. Could there be another delay in there somewhere?
If there is, it would not surprise me at all to see that another sandstorm develops or some kind of divine intervention for one day. And that would put everything onto the 9/23 date, but also put us into 2018 before anything really begins to develop. So that is a key point. However, if we have a 7-day warning in through here on any of these key dates, then look out, because it's basically over. Noah probably had trouble believing what was coming. Can you imagine being told to build this boat? He gets on it. The Lord shuts him in. Can you imagine the ride that he must have had?
Oh, my.
People just can't believe, they can't wrap their minds around the possibilities of such huge change. But I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to see huge changes, whether we're here or not here as a church. I think we're going to see some huge, huge changes. Do you think Richard could possibly come on next week, next Friday or something?
Yeah, I had a good discussion with him, and he's putting all that data together. And I had asked him about possibly, getting with us next week sometime, possibly a Friday show. And he said he's going to try. He says he's not 100% but he'll be able to release by then, he thinks, some data. So we'll just have to wait and see if we can get him on by maybe have a Friday show with him next week.
Yeah, that would, if he's got new information from Glazerson and Rip and some of the other guys there, that would be most fascinating, because the Bible codes are proving, it seems like they're refining it, and that they're becoming more and more and more accurate. I mean, there are a ton of Bible codes out there already that point to 2017 as the removal of the church, which is kind of another confirmation that we may be much closer than we think. Remember, Jesus said it comes as a snare upon the whole earth. So basically, that nobody's watching. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that reminds me of the term suddenly. All the people that don't watch the signs, it happens suddenly to them, and they act like there wasn't any warning. And the Creator must laugh at those people, because he gives all kind of signs to indicate what's coming, but for the people that don't watch the signs, it's suddenly, it appears.
Yeah. Well, okay, Larry, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. And we'll get on next week. And if anything emergency comes up, we'll do an emergency broadcast. Anyway, thanks a lot, folks, for listening. We'll see you next week.